Right now in MX bikes, the push for the newest OEMs is coming as the Project OEM crew dropped their preview for the V0.19 OEM project, and that was a couple weeks ago. They've now since recently updated it with a second version of preview of these bikes. And in the pack, all there is a Gas 450 and 250 and a Yamaha 450 and 250, but it comes with basically what they're working towards with all of the new bikes when the new OEMs come out. So before we do a comparison of the two bikes, as you'll see some riding in the background, I wanted to quickly go over what this project is all about. They say that they're excited to introduce the new OEM preview for their grateful supporters, offering an early look at the latest developments. This preview is a sneak peek at the upcoming full release, showcasing major improvements to bikes and tires based on your feedback. So they're listening to consumers and their patrons who are supporting the OEM project, because you have to be a patron of the OEM project to get these preview bikes in the first place, but it also shows that you're committed to seeing the project continue to grow. And the OEM bikes in MX Bikes are not Poboso. It's not the game creator that is doing it. It's a team of people that have come together to make these bikes to make the game actually feel much better than the base model of the game. And they've been doing it for years. This new update is focused on making racing more fun and realistic. Traction is now dynamic and depends on wheel load. You'll need to adjust your rider position, manage throttle input, and think strategically. Smooth riding will be rewarding with new intuitive techniques for achieving speed, moving beyond the old pin-to-win-it approach. And they've also improved power to the ground for the entire MX2 class. With all the new things, it might take some time to adjust to these changes. They've included a brief guide on what the wheel load is, its effect, and how to influence it to help you get you started. So what you're watching right now is you saw one lap of me on the new OEM 450 preview, and this is the old OEM 450. And what I can tell you from a base standpoint is the new OEMs are a little slower, and they're also a little bit... They turn better, but they also kind of slide a lot more as well. It's a lot of kind of rear end sliding around, which comes with the wheel load thing that they were talking about. So you can see on this lap on the old OEM versus the new OEM Yamaha that I was on, much easier to triple things out of corners. No problem with getting traction for it. A little bit more difficult to lean into corners and turn. But they're trying this new OEM project out so they can kind of pull some toothpaste back in the tube of what already got out, and I'll get into that in a minute. We'll get to the gas on this Supercross track in just a minute. But here's what the crux of what they're trying to do. In motocross, influencing wheel load is crucial for maintaining control, improving traction, and navigating different types of terrain. Wheel load refers to the amount of force or weight applied to each wheel, and you can influence through the various techniques listed below. By mastering these techniques, you can effectively manage wheel load, and with that traction and handling characteristics it brings forth. The fastest way you used to go around these tracks is pretty much just opposite lean to the outside foot peg to make sure you got maximum traction. Oftentimes you could lean back as well to make sure that the rear tire is getting a lot of traction, but the front wheel was getting so much traction that it never really mattered. You didn't need to lean forward. That entirely changed on this new OEM. You got to lean forward in the corners now. You definitely have to weight the foot pegs in different areas. It's very unique. And so far it's been a lot of fun to kind of learn these bikes and try to get a little bit better at them. So here's what they say about each kind of subsection of how to control these bikes. When it comes to body positioning, they say leaning forward, moving your body weight forward will increase the load on the front wheel. This is useful for improving front wheel traction, especially when cornering or navigating downhill sections. If you lean backwards or move your weight backwards, it increases the load on the rear wheel. This helps with accelerating, climbing hills, and when you need more traction on the rear wheel. Pretty obvious, right? In standing versus sitting, if you're standing on the pegs, it raises the center of gravity and allows quicker shifts in body weight, giving you more control over the load. Sitting lowers your center of gravity, which can be more stable in some situations, like corners, or even when it comes to pulling scrubs and whips back, you can sit down and kind of pull it back a little bit easier. With throttle control, when you accelerate, the rear wheel is loaded more as weight shifts backwards. This can be used to gain traction on the rear wheel, but too much throttle can cause the front wheel to lift. And decelerating, rolling off the throttle, or using braking shifts weight forward, increasing the load on the front wheel. This is useful for improving front tire grip, especially when approaching a turn or when you need precise steering. Use the front brake to shift the weight forward, increase the load on the front wheel, reduce it on the rear wheel. effective for stopping power, but requires careful control to avoid locking the front wheel. You guys know all this. Same thing with the rear brake. You can lock up the rear brake to shift your weight backwards a little bit, slide into corners, so on and so forth. When it comes to leaning in the corners, like I said, with this like slippery feeling, and this is now me riding 250s. So this is the new OEM 250 that you're watching, and then I'll do the old OEM 250 and I'll kind of compare both. When cornering, leaning forward while applying the appropriate amount of throttle keeps the front wheel loaded, improving front end grip. Leaning back on exits as you exit the corner and begin to accelerate, shifting your weight backwards can help load the rear wheel, giving you better traction and acceleration out of the corner. So they've gone through all of these changes. They've completely revamped the tires. Brand new tires feature dynamic traction based on wheel load. Wheel load refers to the amount of force and the weight applied to each wheel. We've been through all that. So now there are a whole line of new front tires. There's a 90-90-21 and an 80-100-21 for the rear. And then there's a 120, 140, 100, 110, 120, 80, and 120, 90 for the rear wheels now that are added. Because I think before we only had, 80, 110, 120 for rear, and then 90, 80 for the front as well. The enhanced steering to complement the new tires and recent game updates from Beta 19. They improved driveline for a more direct and stable driving experience, optimized temperature management for better overall performance, refined the shift helper for more realistic responses, ensuring a fairer distinction between bikes with and without quick shifters, improved power to ground for the MX2 class. They're also making subtle changes to the audio sound as well, to provide more accurate feedback on your position within the bike's RPM range while riding. But since the first preview came out, like I said, what you're watching now is a second preview. What they did with that is they took time to listen to feedback from preview 1, and then they implemented it into the preview bikes for preview number 2. This isn't the final and will likely change in the future, but they are calling on you guys who have access to the OEM project to let them know what you guys think of it. As of right now. On the second preview, they improved the wheel load, resulting in more tire bite, and then the bike's enhanced usability of higher gears, increased maximum achievable top speed for all bikes, optimized power delivery for all bikes, refined engine braking to have stronger presence, and they also resolved a little clicking in the audio. So I've now had quite a bit of time on the new preview bikes and jumping back and forth between the OEM bikes. I did a lot of it on the Hunter Bros compound that you're seeing me ride here, and what I can tell you is, as I said, the main point of the difference in feel is they're slower. Now, you're watching me on the old OEM bikes right here ride, and it's super easy, third gear everywhere, over jumping stuff. The new OEMs, you definitely have to ride gear lower a lot more often just to keep the RPMs up. You can't really get as much traction on corner exit as well. It's a lot slipperier. Like as you're coming out of the corner, it'll start sliding and pushing instead of just grabbing and going, which again, like I said at the beginning of this video, the toothpaste was kind of out of the tube with that. And they've started building the replica Supercross tracks, replica national tracks with a larger scale than realistic, because these bikes were getting so fast and unrealistically cornering at a higher speed that they shouldn't be able to do. I mean, in real life, you absolutely just don't go into a corner, lay into the side of a rut, and never have any problems with it. Like, that's what the old OEMs would do for you, because you could just lean into a rut and there would never be the rear end pushing. You would never have the front end knife for the most part. I mean, you could still slide out, but you could just carry so much speed through all these corners as you're watching here, because the bike just would never react in a negative way to it, because essentially it was acting as if you're riding on a street course, and it was just hammering into a notch in the ground and then giving you maximum traction in that notch. And so that's what they're trying to fix with these new OEM bikes. And a lot of people, I think, are going to see this and look at it as a step backwards, because instead of finding something that just feels more comfortable to play the game, they're actually making it more difficult and challenging. But I think that this is the right step, because, as I said, everything was starting to get too big. They were starting to overscale stuff, and I was never good enough at the Supercross tracks to do the massive lines, but guys are starting to do some unrealistic stuff, quadding out of corners because they could carry so much speed, with the traction model that was in the old OEM bikes, just giving you unlimited power and traction out of the corner, and just doing stuff that wasn't fun. And I like I said, I showed you a couple crashes here riding the old 250, because you can see there is still ways to go down, but you could fly into corners 9 times out of 10 and make it no problem. I did this lap, and this was like a Hail Mary lap. The other times I'm riding the new OEM, I'm just trying to get a decent cruise lap in. a Hail Mary lap bike still pretty much did almost the exact same lap time, crashing twice. So the old OEMs definitely had a lot more high speed. They were quick. They were perhaps easier as well. And that's why I said I think that the pushback from these OEMs is going to be a little bit negative. Even talking with some people that I was playing with last night who had more time on Preview 1 than I did, said that the bikes were slower and slipped more in Preview 1, and it looks like with Preview 2 they've already changed that. They've already made it so that it bites a little bit more again. The bikes seem a little bit faster once again, but they're trying to find that middle ground between what players know, that comfortable feeling where the bikes are so easy to ride, versus a feeling of more realistic scale and sensing so that the bikes don't get out of hand before we even get there. I mean, that's all anybody does anymore is just huge lines and rhythm sections. And it was so momentum dependent, because if you messed up a rhythm section in Supercross, there was no chance to go roll 2, 3, which is super easy to do for those guys in real life because it's all about low to medium acceleration range on those types of jumps. But in this game, they had made everything so far apart that it was super momentum dependent because these bikes were going so fast in the corners. So I think that a key factor that they really needed to change with these new OEMs is to slow the speeds down in the corner just a little bit. And I think they did that by introducing some of that slippage. Obviously, with the weighting of the rear and the front tire, you can still go just as fast if you're effective with it. You need to be really good at leaning forward, pulling back, putting the weight on the wheel and the tire in the right spot. But they don't give it to you easy anymore. It's not just lean into the corner and go wide open. That being said, I still do feel that these bikes turn better in terms of the turn radius that they have than the old OEMs. Like this bike, when I was going in and out of inside lines, specifically when I was on the Supercross track on the 450 gas, this thing would turn on a dime. But then you would turn quickly and lose all momentum, and then it would not have enough power or oomph to triple in out of a corner or something like that. So it's, in a long way, it's kind of saying that they took a little bit of a step back in terms of speed and performance with the wheels, but they took like a big step forward in getting closer to what is realistic about actually riding a dirt bike and needing to, be in the right RPM range, be in the right spot on the bike to weight the foot peg correctly. All of those things that make riding a dirt bike realistic. And I think that that's actually a good thing that they're choosing to approach it this way instead of just continuing to fall more on the unrealistic side. Because I'll tell you something, MX Bikes players, you may not want to hear this, but it's the reality. A lot of people these days I hear say MX Bikes is just glorified MX Versus ATV Legends or glorified Reflex because it became so arcadish with how fast you could go through corners. And I still think that that's not the right way of saying it because it was very hard to get good enough to go fast through those corners. But once you were good enough to go fast through corners, it was game over. You were doing very unrealistic lines all the way down the straightaways. And I think that this will certainly help people building tracks to scale things back down to a little bit more of a realistic scaling. Like if you played these OEM 450s, I'm on this current generation OEM 250 riding the track right now. If you played these OEMs on the MX Bikes practice track, or I can't remember the other track name that Poboso put out, you would overjump everything immediately because when he put the game out, he built stuff with realistic scaling and tried to have a more realistic feeling physics with the bikes that he released back then. And the OEM team started pushing things along a little bit so that the game became easier to play. But in terms of, traction models, how the tire felt, how you weight the foot peg and stuff like that, they started getting further away from that base physical aspect of, if you go so fast, you're going to overjump something. But if you're going barely anywhere and you're still overjumping something, there's probably something going on with the physical aspect of the game. So I think this will help a lot with descaling things, with tracks, and also I think it's still going to be a win overall for people to play these bikes and have fun. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this little overview. Be sure to download it in the description below if you guys or look at the description below because you still need to become a patron to actually download it. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please get involved in the comment section below. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. So long for now.